Have you tried the new flow approval processes in Salesforce? If you tried them, do you still have questions? I recently shared a video and a blog post on this topic, and I noticed there are a lot of questions that came through. I wanted to share a different use case that I have implemented using this new powerful feature. They are very powerful and flexible. Now, without further ado, let's dive into this new auto-launched approval process I have built for you. All right, I'm going to try to walk you through a complete implementation of an approval process using flow approval processes. These were just released recently, as you know. Now, I'm going to start by creating a screen flow that I need for the approval step. Now, I've received quite a number of questions around how I can leverage queues. So I'm going to use a queuable object, which is going to be case in this case, right? So we're going to approve cases. So let me just go ahead and create a new flow here. And I'm going to use the template here. And under templates, I need my approvals workflow evaluate. So now this template comes with already variables that I need for my flow-based approval process. So this is a simple form that has here a radio choice, and the value for this radio choice is also important. You'll see that there's an approve choice and a reject choice. Let's just quickly look at those. The approve choice is here. You need to pass a string of approve, that's all. And then for the reject, you need to pass a string of reject. That will be the outcome of the approval step, and this will be passed to the orchestration. And these variables are marked for output. Let's check that quickly right here. Edit, you'll see it's marked and available for output. Approval decision the same way, marked available for output. Let's just go ahead and make a couple of modifications here. So I'm going to add a display text on top of this, right? And this is approval title display text. And this is gonna say, please approve or reject the case, right? So that will be kind of the headline above it. Let's make that bold. And that's going to allow me to save this template. And when I'm working with templates, I can't really save this and modify this as a template. I'm going to save this as a flow now, right? And that's what I need. Evaluate advanced approval requests for cases. All right, save. So that should do it. I have my approval step flow, and it's just a simple screen of please approve or reject the case, approval decision. The user can mark one of these and then add the comments and click finish, right? That will complete this step. This is going to show up under the work items on the Lightning record page that the approval is scoped for. We're going to get to that. All right, so let me just activate this one and see whether I have a queue made up for this. That's also important, because we said we're gonna leverage queues. All right, so yeah, I have actually a queue set up here. This is the preview org I've been using for years for several demos. So I have actually a Gator Alumni queue. I'm just gonna use that. And it's actually set up to work on cases, which is great, right? Gator Alumni queue. And I'm part of this as a user. I'm actually selected under this queue. That's great. So we'll just leverage that. Now I need to build an orchestration for my approval. I'm going to use the start from scratch. I can actually use two different type of approval orchestrations for this, either the record triggered or the auto launched. Now I have already recorded and shared an example for the record triggered. I'm going to do the auto launch now, and then we'll just trigger this from a button. All right, so this is how my orchestration starts. There's not much to see for the start element because this is an auto launch one, right? Let's see if we have a record ID variable. We already have. So this is what's going to be receiving the record ID for the record. Well, there is submitter and submission comments here. So other variables that are already provided for me. So let me just save this right off the start. Case approval orchestration. So let's save this. All right, so now what I can do is I can add here. It's just warning me it doesn't have any elements. We need to add some. We know that already. So I'm going to add a stage here. So remember, when you're building orchestrations, any orchestration really, not only approvals, you're going to have to add a stage before you can add a step. So step is going to be kind of the lower level step that is going to be associated with the flow, right? But before you can add that, you need to add a stage. Your stage can have one or many steps. That's up to you. So I'm going to add, and I'm going to call this one stage 1. The stage over here. Now, under this stage, I can add an approval step or background step. So there are only two options here. An approval step is the step that I'm going to need. And this is going to expect those standard variable outputs coming from the screen flow, the template, to operate without any issues. Now, I'm going to say approval step will be case approval. And I'm going to call this one, actually, let me just add it to the beginning, say step 1.1, case approval, right? All right, so now I need to point this approval step to the approval flow. So now I can select conditions as to when I need to start this step. So I could actually have multiple approval steps here. And I can assign conditions to each of them. And I can decide whether I want to trigger that particular approval step depending on, for example, field values on the case type, and that kind of stuff. So let's go ahead and not add conditions for now. So all the cases are going to go to this step when obviously the user clicks the button to send it to approval, right? And I'm going to decide what action to run. This is the active screen flow that I need to point to for the approval step. And here I can see, I have too many flows in this org, so it's going to be case XPR evaluate approval request screen flow. I think that's the one we just created. Yeah. So I'm going to select that, and I decide here who the approver needs to be. Now I have several options here. I can choose a user. I can choose a user resource. When I choose a user resource, I can actually pass variable values to this resource, meaning depending on the logic and depending on the outputs I receive from possibly other background steps like auto-launch flows, I can decide to change who will receive this approval step, right? Who is going to be authorized to approve it. I can use a public group, again, group resource, make it variable. I can use a queue resource. Now I'm going to use the queue and I'm going to look for the Gator one. All right, Gator Alumni queue. Now this is hard coding the queue name here. And if you want to kind of deploy, let's say from scratch orgs to production environment, from one scratch org to another scratch org, or to sandbox and then sandbox to production, it may make sense not to hard code this here, right? So now here is the step where I can decide to customize the approval notification email. Now by default, the approval will receive an email saying, you know, this record has been sent for your approval. I can customize this, and then if I customize it, I get to choose what the subject and the body will be right here, right? And then I can just type stuff in here, or I can use formulas, variable values, or like a text template or something like that. I can build it. I'm not going to do that right now. And here is where I decide, you know, which record ID I'm going to use here, which record will show this approval step work item, which record lightning page, right? So for that, I'm going to use the record ID. So I want to show the work item step on the same record on the case. I can decide to actually show it on the account, right? If I especially enforce that, let's say every case has an account, if it's required, then I can go up to the account and show that there. That's totally fine. Remember, the email will have a link to the record that will show the work item. Now here is where I decide whether to lock the record. When I lock the record, there will be a validation activated for the record that will stop the user from changing it until the process is complete. And I can also allow the approver to edit the locked record. If I think my process requires that the approver can make final modifications on the record before they approve it, then I can allow that. I'm going to remove that for now. All right. So what else do we have here? Select when to complete the step. Now I can get quite sophisticated and I can actually enforce customized rules and decide when to complete the step. Now I forgot to mention when I was reviewing the criteria when to start the step, I can actually use kind of the condition and criteria builder line by line to do this, or I can point this to an auto-launched flow. And that auto-launch flow, when the auto-launch flow returns true, this is going to proceed, right? You know, that then it's going to consider that the step has been completed. So I'm not going to use any of that for now, right? So this is what we have done and finished. In the other use case where I demonstrated this with a record triggered flow, I added a task. You know, I had a decision and I created a task to show that it was approved. So I'm not going to do that for now. It's not really required. So once you complete all that, you can actually save and activate it. All right. So let me show you what I have done for the opportunity record triggered approval process that I have created for you. I actually created an auto-launch version of that one and I tied that to a button, right? So, you know, just to show that functionality, I have not really shared that with anyone yet. Let me just go to the opportunity and show you how that's done, right? And that is clearly explained in Salesforce documentation that you can find online. So you're going to create a button here, And this is the button I created, Approval Orchestration. It's actually a detail page button on the record page, and it is of type URL, right? So if you go to this, you're going to see that it is using this URL here. So the way you construct this URL is the flow path URL is going to be used, right? So this is the URL that I get when I go to my flow detail. That's listed there, so that I can use. And I'm going to need to pass the record ID to this URL, like as a parameter. That comes after the question mark. Record ID equals, and this is the syntax and notation that I need to use. Opportunity ID will be passed in this case. The submitter will be the user ID, clicking the button. And then I say, you know what, after you do all that, I want you to end up on this opportunity screen, right? Send the user to the Lightning record page for this opportunity. So this is the syntax for the button. So we're going to use something similar here. Let's go ahead and find the parameters we need over there. We're going to need the flow URL. I mean, it's actually an orchestration URL. So let's go ahead and find that. So this is the orchestration that we have created. If I go to my view details and versions, I'm going to see the path for this flow, right? And I can use that for my button. So I'm going to go to my object manager, to case. And there I'm going to go to button links and activations and create a new button. I gotta be on the right side here. New button link. All right, so let's call this case approval. I usually throw in an emoji in there. All right, so this is going to be a detail page button. It's not a link, right? So it's a button. And I want this to, do I want this to display in the new window? No, I'm just sending them back to the same case. So with or without sidebar, no sidebar, okay? You can decide what to do there. It's gonna be URL. And if I forget how to refer to the case ID and such, I can always use this insert merge field part. I'm going to paste the URL for this flow. I'm going to also paste my prior example to kind of leverage that for this example. So this part is going to replace this part, right? And then all this needs to read case. Let me just double check here. Case ID, if I insert case ID here, it reads exactly the same. Okay, so that should be correct. Check syntax. No syntax problems. So I'm going to save this. Well, there's a warning. It says the new custom button will not show until you add it to the page layout. So we're gonna have to do that. So case page layouts. And here is my case layout. And I'm going to go under buttons. I see case approval. I need to take that and drag it down. Doesn't go there, doesn't go there. It goes right here. So into the case detail section. And under custom buttons, right? So yeah, it's there now. So it's gonna show. All right, we have done that. Let's see if we can get this, to work. So let's go to cases, pull up a case. All right, so we still gotta edit the page here on the Lightning side. Go to detail. So what are the actions here that actually show? And I can add here in this list the action button that I have just created. Case approval, right? It's right here. I'm going to move this to the top. All right, so that should show. Save. If you're not activated, activate and make it standard for your organization. All right, it's right here. I can actually do a case approval using this button. That should be possible. Just change the name of this case. So let's say case approval test 1. And I'm gonna send this to approval here. How are we gonna know whether this worked? So we're gonna go to approvals. We go to approvals. I can check under approvals, home, manage my approval submissions, and you'll see that the case number 1110 has been sent to approval and it's in progress, right? So let's look at the detail. Let's look at the detail here. All right, when I pull this up, this approval submission actually shows me that it is in progress. And if I see, and the send approval email is on, and if I see here under the approval work items, the approval work item has been created. It's right here. And it's assigned. Let me just pull that up. And it's called step 11 case approval. That's where we are. And it is assigned to Gator Alumni queue. So it clearly states this has been assigned to the queue. I am one of the users using that queue, under that queue. And I don't see the work item because I failed to add the work item component to my page layout. Let me just do that. Edit page. And add the orchestration work item. Low orchestration work guide. It's called work guide, and the work item shows under the work guide. So I'm going to add this here to the right panel. And here I get to decide whether I show the orchestration run name, stage name, step name. I don't think this is necessary. Let's leave the run name for now and hide work guide when empty. I can decide to hide it because when there is nothing showing there, it kind of still sits there without anything in it. Is silly. So I'm going to save this and come back to the case again. Okay, now that I come back to the case, I can actually see the work guide item here. So this has been sent to my approval right now because I am one of the members of that queue, and I get to approve or reject this record. But before I do that, I want to also go back and see whether this shows up in the case queue, Gator Alumni queue. No, it doesn't. So the queue here is used as an identifier of who to send the approval to, right? So your case up for approval is not really dispatched to the queue. That's my understanding from the functionality here. So, and if you have multiple users in that queue, they are all going to see this here. So they get to approve or reject, right? It's kind of like a parallel approval situation. So I'm going to approve this one, and I'm going to say approved here in the comments. Great work. By the way, I'm not going to show you whether I can edit this or not because I am the system administrator profile, and I'm pretty sure I have modifiable activated for this profile. So That's not going to work. But if you don't have modify all activated, you're not going to be able to edit this document. You're going to get like a validation error message as soon as you try to edit and save. So I'm going to finish this now. Now that this is finished, we are going to see the progress under approvals. So go to home and manage my approval submissions. Now I can see that this case has been approved. And this is the record, this is the approval submission. And I can see that this has been approved. And it was actually submitted by Andy Utkan, owner Andy Utkan. And if I go to the related here, I can see approval work item, the approval submission details. Let me just go to the approval submission here and show you that the approval submission itself, and I received that question also before on YouTube and on the blog post on Salesforce Rake, whether I can see the comments and where do I see them. The comments actually get passed to this field here, comments approved, great work, under the approval submission detail. Here I can also see the action performed by Andy Utkan. The action will be always performed by a single user, and that user will be recorded here. You're not going to see the queue or something, but it could be anybody under that queue. So let's see what happens with the emails. So I'm using the standard emails here, and here is the first email that the submitter receives. It says, okay, hello, and we received your submission for this record. There's a link to the record, right? So you definitely can see that here. And then this is the email that says your queue has been assigned the following request. Step 1.1 case approval. To view the record being approved, go to this record. There's a record link. It'll have a work guide item. And here is the part, and I received that question before, that actually leverages the approval functionality for email replies. So under your process automation settings, I'll show you in a minute, there's a checkbox that activates email approvals. And by replying to this email, you can also approve the record. You don't really have to go to the record, pull up the record, and then work on the work guide. And here we see that the approval submission has been updated. So your submission for this record is now approved. Notification going to the requester. Let's look whether we received emails in the email account designated for the queue. That question also came before. So now we see here that this designated email account received an email saying a record has been submitted for approval. Again, it has a link to the record, so the members can go and approve or reject. And at the same time, you can actually reply from this email account as well to approve or reject here. And then again, the email has also been received here when the approval step has been assigned to the queue here, right? So that also goes to the designated email account for the queue itself. So under process automation settings in setup, you have a couple of settings. Like for example, by default, the email approval sender is the approval submitter. You can change that, right? And here you have the checkbox that says enable email approval response. So this is where you activate or deactivate that functionality.